Okay, so now let's do something with the bottom loop or the bottom control loop. So you see that we did the while loop here. We test the condition at the top. This is the top control loop. We'll do something similar, but now we will switch it around so we do a bottom control. So what I'll do is just basically I'm going to comment this out. So we'll leave this as is so we can compare later on. And I will just do that right down here, okay, for the bottom control. So the bottom control is you will use a do loop, okay, so do, and if you type in the word do, you see that you have the do and do until and do while. Actually, you know what, maybe we should do until first. Okay, it's similar to the do while, but you do until. So if you click on do until, if you type in do until, this is the same as similar to what you have up here. And then the difference between the until and the do while is that your counter is opposite. Okay, if you read in a sentence, you would say do this while the counter is less than max. Okay, until you say do this until the counter is greater than the max, right? You can see that the reading is different. So if the counter is less than max, you keep doing it until it reaches it exceeds the max. Okay, not just exceeds the max, but it should be greater than or equal to max, right? Because if we have 10 items, then we want to count from all the way to that 10. Is it? So 0, well, so we start from 0 to max. If max is 10, then it will be 0 to 9. And then here is, well, counter is until the counter is greater than 10, right? So you want to include, I think you want to include the max in there. If it's 10 items, then it will be from 0 until 9. 9 is not greater or equal to 10. Until if it's 10, then that's true, so it will exit out. So you can see that the wording or is the same, except the operator are now completely switched, and also we changed the condition here. And so when you do the loop, then the data or the statements will still be the same. We'll just say num is equal to the list data dot items, okay, counter. We still have the same counter, which is 0, right? We start from 0, and then we add that same output to the output box. Items add, and then put the num in here. And we still need to update our counter. So counter is counter plus equal 1. Okay. Let me just remove that a little bit. You can see the comparison here. So it looks very similar. Okay. The difference here again is the word until, and then the condition, we reverse the operators in the other direction and we included. So when you do this type of loop, you have to make sure with your condition. Okay, if you so if you just read it in like a simple English phrase, you understand it really better. And that's why Visual Basic is easier in this sense. So you say do this loop here until the counter is greater or equal to 10, then we stop, right? That means, or while it is less than 10, then we do the body of the loop. Same thing. So let's see if that if this works. I'm going to run it now, and if it all works, I should get the same result on the right side. Okay. So it's just a different way of how you phrase your condition here. So one actually is the opposite of the other. So do while is the condition is true. Here we do until the condition is false. Okay. You're just rephrasing differently. So again, just be careful when you use this. If I take out the equal sign, put greater than max, you see that I might have a different result. Okay, so you have an error here, right? I have an out of range. Because if you do that, I mean it's if you put like 10 10, then 10 is greater than 10. No, 10 is not greater than 10, so it will still do another loop, and so therefore that value, the index, is out of bounds, and so therefore it's never, it won't stop there, so you have an error. So you have to say equal to that. And if you put this into a chart, you'll see that they are opposite each other. Less than equal to, the opposite of that is, I mean, less than something is, the reverse is greater or equal to. Okay, it negates one the other way. So if this is were to say greater than max, then here had to be less than or equal to max. Okay, and if this is like equals max, then here will be not equal max, right? So it's the reverse of the other one. Okay, so be careful how you phrase these conditions. Okay, so that's the do until and do while. And sometimes they refer to this as a positive test loop. This is a negative test loop. Okay, because this is a negative. You do until something is true. Because initially this is, while this is true, you do until it's false. Here it says do until this is false. Because the current state is true, keep do until you get it false. Okay? Oh, no, I mean the condition is false. I'm sorry, it's false. So keep doing until it's true. Okay? So this is sometimes called a negative test. All right, so let's move on to our bottom control test loop. I'm going to comment this out. Now the bottom control is you would do like do, and then again it's the do, just the do loop here, and then down here you put the loop. You see the do loop here, and this is where you put the condition down here. While, so you can see either the while or until, same thing, one is negative, one is positive. So if you do the while, and then the while will be like, again, counter is less than max, right? This is a positive, the same thing as this one here, except I moved this whole piece to the bottom of the loop. So it looks like that now. If you move this up here, you get back to the other loop, same thing as before, but now is the bottom control. Okay, so remember that we initially started with counter is 0. So if I were to just copy and paste this down there, right? If you copy this and put it in here, uncomment this out. If you just do that, it should work, right? Okay, so initially it was 0 because we said up here is 0, and we're not doing any testing here. So it's going to read the 0 position of the list, which is the first number. We add that to the output list box, and then we increment our counter to 1, and then we test the condition at the bottom. Is 1 less than the max, which is 10 or 12, whatever that is? If that is true, then we go back to line 23 and 24 and continue the loop just like before. Okay, so this is the bottom control loop, and if you save and run it now, if everything is correct, it should still be the same as before. So you can see it has the same copy just across here. So the difference comes when you have something like this. Let's just say that, you know, let's just say that I say that max for some reason. Okay, if I put like here, for example, max instead of count like this, if you happen to accidentally say max is 0, okay, Max is 0. So if you think about it, is 0 less than 0? It's not, right? So in that case, the condition is false. So therefore, if you put this in the top control, then you will never run these 3 statements here. But because this is a bottom control, and even though the counter is greater or not equal to max, is false, it's guaranteed to run through these 3 statements one time. So when you run this, you will still see that 1 will get copied over to the list here. Okay, and it will stop there because now the counter is no longer, this condition is no longer true, and therefore it stops the loop there. But before you even reach down to the condition statement, you already run it one time. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the condition is. The condition may be true or false, doesn't really matter. It doesn't really care. All I know is that it runs through the whole loop here one time. And so that is the major difference between the bottom control and the top control loop. And the Visual Basic call it the do loop. It's called a top control and then the bottom control, or a pre-test and a post-test. So this would be a pre-test loop. This is a post-test loop. You test at the bottom. In other languages like Java or C or C++, they will just say this is the do loop. Okay, the do loop is always test at the bottom. The opposite of the do loop is just the while loop. So we don't have a do while loop in most other language. It's just the do loop or the while loop. Okay, so again, if you want to copy this and then paste it down here, and I'm going to comment these out. Okay, and we'll change this to until, right? Do until something is false. So when we do that, if you remember, you have to change this sign. What is the opposite of this less than sign? Will be so we do until the counter is greater or equal to max, right? Same thing, same as before. So in this case, it's a bottom control, and I think the max is still set to 0. So you'll see that it is the same thing. You will run the code here one time. Test the condition is now, because counter is 1 greater than max, so therefore it would exit out the loop. But before it does that, I've already added 1 to the other side of the list. Okay. So this is the bottom control. I'm going to do one loop until. And so on. So I'm going to put this back to list data dot items dot count. Okay, that's the max. And now it should work just like before. Copy everything over to the other list. Okay, so you have those 2 options. And you can choose whichever is convenient for you or makes more sense to you. The loop until is a little bit confusing, but if you just read it out, it probably makes sense. But the do while is probably the more common one, the more popular one, because again, do until is, as far as I know, is only available in the Visual Basic. Okay. Okay, so one more thing I want to show you is the initialization part, which I was going to tell you earlier, but now I think it's a good time to do that. So if you look at this list box here, the first box, you have these numbers in here, right? And these are some numbers that you could, some arbitrary numbers, or could be some random numbers. You can add it in here. Well, let's just say that we want to start this list with a number from 1 to 12, right? And so you could say, you could go in here and add these 1 through 12. Okay, or you can have it so that when you run your program, and it will add the data here automatically through the code. So initially it will be no data, right? So if you like save this and run, it will just be no data, right? And if you add, you get an error because there's no data there. It's a string of white space. So what you can do is you can actually initialize this list here programmatically using the loop. Like we add 1 through 10, and then we'll copy this over to the next list when you click the loop here. Okay, so if you look at the form here, you see that we have a subroutine called button loop click here. It handles the click button. So only one here. This only happens when you click the button, and then it will run the code here. So we could do something like when you click that list box, right up here, well, maybe not here, but right about here, for example, we could do like initialize, list data. Okay, we could do that here to populate this first list box with some data before we do the rest of the code. So I'm going to say do, or you can use while, do while, it's fine. I want to add, let's just say 10 numbers, okay? So we can say do while counter is less than 10, including 0, right? So if we 0 through 9, that's 10 numbers. Then we want to add like we want to say lst data dot items add the counter plus 1, right? You don't want to include it. You want to include only 1 through 10. You can do that here, or you can say I want to start a counter with from 1 instead. So if you do that, then you don't need to do the add 1 here, right? Either way to do it. It's lots of ways. So let's just say we want to add from 1 through 10, and we're starting at 0. We happen to do that, so we just have to do that 10 times. Okay, so if you do that now, and if you click run, you see that there's no data there yet until we click the button to loop it, right? Because the code is inside the button here. And if you click on it, you see that it has some type of error, right? So what happens now is we have what? Notice I can't move my, I can't click anywhere, I can't move my thing, I can't close it. What happened? What just happened? If I look at my code, I can still look at my code, but I can't do any more typing because my system is locked. If you look at my application, it froze. What happened? Nobody know? Infinite loop, right? What does it occur? Where's the infinite loop? Because this condition here is never false, right? Because we never increment the counter, so therefore counter is 0, and this always be 0, it always be true, and this loops here tries to add 0, 1 to it, but then it loops, so you have an infinite loop between here, and it never stops. When this happens in the program, you're lucky because now if it's an application, then you have to really shut down your computer and restart. Okay, but while you're coding in Visual Basic, you can always go up here and click the stop button here. Okay, click stop, and then now you can have control back to your program again. So when that does happen, you can't close your application. Make sure you click the red stop icon to stop your application. And then now we need to go here and say counter is plus equal 1. So we increment the counter to prevent that from having that infinite loop. Okay. So if you run it again now, it should should do something, but we have an error. Okay, let's try again. So run it now, and if I click loop it, it gives me an error. It says I have an out of range exception. That means I don't have the counter. Why is it out of range? And this is also, you have to kind of be a little bit careful because when look at a counter here is 0. Okay, and this is where you have sequential lines of command comes important here. Having 0 here, here's my max number. I set it to the count number of items in the items list, the data list, right? So initially this is 0 because I did not initialize it, I did not populate the list with items yet, so the max is actually 0. Okay, and because it's 0, then down here, when I do this, I have a problem here because something is not right. Okay, so let's just say, so we can initialize some data. You want to make sure that if you want to know the total items here, okay, you want to move this line after the loop here, right? So I populate my data first, and now I know how many items I have. In this case, it would be 10, and then now I can know my max number, which is 10. Okay. Not only that, because I'm using the same counter here, it's 0. I loop through this 10 times. I add 10 to it. So initially, when I'm done with this, counter is actually has a value of 10. So after this, you also want to reset your counter back to 0, right? If you're using the same counter here. If you don't, it will start with 10, and then that's why down here, get the list item of the 10th counter. That's false. They have an outer bound because outer bound of the index, you don't have 10 item here. The 10th position, you don't have it. So just make sure you reset that to 0 again in this situation here. And then once you populate your list box, and then you reset your counter to 0, and now you can get the max count from the list box, and the rest should be as like before. So if you run it again now, everything should work just like before. Okay, so we populate the data with from 1 to 10. We didn't include 0 because we added 1 to it, and then just again copy everything over to the other side of the box. So again, notice that when you run this application, the list is empty. And then until you click it, it does it really fast. What if you want to see the list first, like we saw earlier, and it only populate this side of the list box after we click the loop button? Okay. So to do that, then there is an initial step that you don't get to see here, and that is by going to the form. Okay, back to the form design, and click on your form here, not the button or not anywhere else, but your form. Okay, and if you double click the form, it's going to present you with another subroutine. Okay, it's called handled mybase.load. Okay, so this is the first subroutine. It runs your form. It will run this one first because right now it's empty. It's not there, but behind the scene it runs it once. It runs everything here, bless you, and then it waits for the button to be clicked, right? Okay, so in here, I'm going to move this to the top. So I'm going to copy this. If yours is at the top already, that's great. If it's not, you can just copy this whole thing and move it to the top here so we can see better. So this is called the form load, when you load the form. And this is where you actually initialize any data. Right? So instead of having it in here in the button when you click, I would move all these here. So I'm going to cut that up and put it in here. Okay? So the counter, I need my own counter, and put it up here as well. And then down here, I don't have to worry about this anymore. I can leave that as it was like just before. Okay, so My counter is that, and how many items? I said 10. I could have another variable here called dim max as integer, and I want to add, maybe 15 numbers or 12 numbers, right? So in that way, just a counter less equal to max. So it could be any number of data you added to the list, and just add from 1 to 12 or something. So when you run your form, it's going to look for this mybase.load handle, and it will execute any code in here first. Once it executes everything in here, then it waits for the event. Okay. So if you ever have used or learned like Java before, this will be similar to like the main method. Okay, it starts the application. So it starts in here. You can do any code in here if you want. It's fine. Before it actually loads the form, and then it just sits there and wait. Okay, so if you put that there, if you save it, if you run, you'll see that the box is now populated with some data. Right? It runs in the background. Not in the background, but it runs it before it actually loads the other part. So the button here is an event that is associated with the button here. So this one here is an event that is associated with the form, because when you run the form, it executes the data, and whatever code you put in here will actually run right away, and then it will now wait for an event. Okay, so that's why you see the data here are populated, because these are these occur inside the load here. So you did that, you preset your data with some values, and then now it works just like the rest, right? Okay. So if you want to initialize your form with some default data, you can do it in two ways. One, in your form, you can explicitly go in here and then populate this with your data, like your button here. You can go to your go to the control and then change the color, all that stuff, right? So go here, and if you want to change it to a different color and so on, so you can do that here. So again, when you run this, it's normal. If you want to change this button to a different color, when you run this, you can change that programmatically. So in here in the code, up here, it doesn't matter before or after, doesn't matter. You could just say after the loop, I want to change the button. So it's btn loop dot I think it's the color, back color. The back color, I think back color is equal to color dot, let's just say blue. Okay, I think if you set that there, so you can do this in the program instead of using the properties in the design. Let's see if that does anything. So you see that it changes the color to blue in the code. We did that in the code. So you can preset everything here in the code using programs or statements to do that for you. Bless you. Instead of just do that using the design mode. Okay, so you would do that inside the load mybase.load method. And to get there is, again, you just double click your form, and that should generate that for you. Okay. So when you build your application, you say you want to initialize some data, do it inside the mybase.load. Okay, so like when you run your payroll application, for example, you could have done here. I mean, we didn't learn it before, but now that you know, you could go back and say, hey, I want to pre-populate my data in here. Anything I want to change, I can change in here programmatically, so I don't have to do it manually. Right? And in here, you can do all kinds of code, just like you do normally code. You can ask the user to prompt something, get a message to display and do all those stuff here. So everything here will occur first. That's the first thing it does before it waits for an event. Okay. Any questions on how we populate this list box? So this way you have much more control, because now I can literally add data here to as many item as I want using the code. Right? You can add 1,000,000 numbers if you want, or just anything here. And you can do that very quickly using the loop. Right? Imagine you have to do that 1,000,000 times, line by line, 1,000,000 lines of code. That would take you forever to do that. So with the loop, you can see how easy it is to add data to the list box here. And then once that's been populated, we can use another loop to loop to that data and check for something. So let's just say that in our loop, we want to, let's just say we want to comment this out, and we want to look for a certain number, right? So you want to loop to that number. Let me see if I can, let's see how we do that. Oh, okay, do that. Okay, so let's say we don't know what those numbers are in the list, and we want to loop through that list box, and we only want to grab the let's say even numbers out of the list. How do we do it? We loop through the list and we only grab the even numbers out of it. So we ignore all the odd numbers. So we do the do while, right? So do while, the condition will still be the same. We're going to count everything from the counter, which is 0, if it's less than the max, right? Which is, in this case, will be whatever that is. And because the max is what? Max is the list data count. So if we have 10, it'll be 10. If we have 100, it'll be 100. And then here we set 12, so we're expecting a 12 item. Okay? So loop through that list box, and then somewhere down here, just make sure you increment your counter. Okay, just to make sure you don't have the infinite loop. So the first item comes through is the first item on the list. If you look at this list, we know, because when you run this code, you see that it's all from 1 to 12, but it can be a random number. Assume that we don't know that. How do you check it? You look at the first item here. How do you check if that's a even or odd number? So what we have a number here? Yeah, we had num, right? Num, I use that to store the number. So we will check, we'll read the num from the list box, right? So num is equal to lst data dot items. The first item, which is the item at the counter position. So it grabs the first number, or that current number, whatever that current number is. And if you start from the first item, it will be the 0th number. And then we want to add that number to the output box only if the number is an even number. How do we do it? How do we check that? How do we validate or check that if the number is an even number, and if it's not, then we'll skip it and we'll move to the next number? How do you check a number if it's even or odd? Do you remember how to do it? I mean, besides the program, in terms of just in general, or in math or in general, how do you know if a number is an even number? Right. So if you any number you divide by 2 and there's no remainder, then that's an even number, right? If there is a remainder other than 0, then that's an odd number. Okay, so that is the idea, the concept behind finding out whether a number is even or odd. So in code, we use a keyword called mod in Visual Basic for the modulus. Okay, and other languages they'll use the % symbol, but in Visual Basic we use the word mod. So if you think of, like, you say, you do like, so we say if here, if the number, which is whatever number is, usually you say if divided by 2, right? If that's equal divided by 2, but how do you get the remainder? Is you use the word mod in here. So so we replace it with the word mod. Means find the modulus. If n divided by 2, and if you get a remainder of 0, is that what it is? Yeah. Okay, if that is true, if n divided by 2, you get a remainder of 0, right? It's even number. If that's the case, then we want to add that to the output. Items to add. We add the number to the output. Otherwise, we just skip the number. Okay, so you have to know a little bit of this math involved in here, and this is quite common, the mod. Okay, so so the mod will return the remainder. If you want to just get the whole number instead, then you will use this symbol, the backslash. Okay, that will give you the whole number and then not the remainder but the other number instead. Okay, if you do the regular division, then you get a decimal number, right? So so make sure you review those. So if num mod 2 is 0, then that's an even number, so therefore go ahead and print that to the list box, otherwise skip it, and then we move the counter to the next position, and then we check it again, and so on. Okay? So if you run it now, we'll see that it should only display the even numbers from that list. Okay, so all the odd numbers are skipped. Okay, what about we want to do the other way? I want to get the odd numbers. How will I do it? So I got my even numbers. Now I want to use only the odd numbers. I want to only display or move the odd numbers out of that list. How would you modify this code? All you do is just make sure this is not 0, right? If it's 0, it's even. If it's not 0, then it's odd. Okay? If that is true, if the number divided by 2 is not equal 0, it's odd number, so therefore print that. And if it's even, you skip it. So I'm just really simple on that switch. So you get all the odd numbers instead of the even numbers. Okay? So you can see how the mod can be useful in this type of scenario. So in this case, it will loop through the entire list all the way down to 12 or 11 in this, right? All the way down to the max, because we force it to run it that way, right? We're going to increment one at a time all the way down to up to 12, and then we'll exit out. what if it's halfway there and you want to stop the loop and say, if I find a number that is equal to a certain number, then we stop there. Okay. So instead of saying this, I'm going to comment this out, and let's just say that if num is equals 7, right? If that is the magic number, then you want to stop there. And before that, we're going to add the number. So you want to add a number there to the list box. So 0 comes in, we read the 0 counter, we read the first number, and we add that first number to the output box. We check if the number is 7 or not. If it's not, then it will move on to the next number. Okay? And then if its next number is 2, we do that all the way until we get a number to equal this number, whatever that position may be. In this case, it's sequential, so it's easy, but assume that it's a random number from 1 to a million, right? So if I find a number, then I don't need to look further, and therefore I want to exit out of that loop. So I put exit do in here. This will force the loop to stop. And we'll stop there, whatever that position may be. It could be the 10th position. It could be if you have a long list number, it could be the second position. It could be the 999th position. Okay, it will stop there, and it will terminate the loop at that number. Okay, so if you run this, then it should stop at a number 7 once we get there. And you see that once you reach 7, it stops, and then it stops the loop, and it doesn't continue on with the 8 and 9, 10, 11 to 12, and then we're done there. So we cause this loop to exit or stop prematurely. And if that's the case, then that's the case. Sometimes you will need to do that, especially if you have a long list of data or a long list of customer information, and you want to know if a certain customer exists in that database. Okay, you don't want to loop your entire database because that's not really efficient. Just stop it when you find something, and then you can exit out. Okay, so you can exit out of the loop anytime if you do the exit do here for any of the do while loop. The do until or the do while is the same thing. Let's say exit do, and you force the loop to stop there. Okay, any questions on how what we just did? Okay, do you want to take a break, or do we just continue on? I'm completely open to anything. Take a break? Move on? We get a vote? Okay, all right, let's just take a break. We'll come back and we'll do some nested loops, and we'll